Hello, my name is Maria Bezubova and you're at my channel Fertilizers Jazz. Here we talk about events, trends, technologies in the world of fertilizers and agriculture. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and let's jazz! We continue the regular mini-series of quarterly market reviews and forecasts from the prominent market analysts. And today we will speak about phosphates. In order to do this, I invited again a very cool guest, Chris Vlachopoulos, markets editor for phosphates at ICIS. I'm very glad to welcome you, Chris, and thank you very much for joining me.
Likewise, Maria. Thank you so much. I mean, speaking of cool guests, I can't imagine a cooler person to be chatting with, but thank you so much. It's so lovely to always have these catch-ups and see where the market is going and see what interesting trends are going to surprise us this time.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So, Chris, Q3 is behind, and we met in a quarter from now. This quarter was full of events, and phosphates prices remained an extremely elevated level, I would say, all these 3 months. So, my first question to you is, what do you think were the key events during past quarter that shaped current market conditions and that will influence the next quarter, Q4?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like you covered the most important, which is, how firm prices have been and really mostly remain for the most part, even though we've seen signs of easing, particularly in India, which is, of course, the bellwether for all these sorts of things, and China. But the firmness of pricing really has been really prohibitively expensive for most farmers and buyers around the world. That has really dictated the pace of how the market has been moving. We've seen some interesting developments, which I'm sure we'll get into in more detail. We've seen the phosphoric acid price settle in India. That really is a good predictor for, is it better to import? Is it better to manufacture product in India? We've also seen, of course, some purchase tenders in Ethiopia and Bangladesh that have seen some rather unusual and interesting developments there. We've also seen China open up to the world a little bit more. We've seen high-level meetings between India and China affirm the willingness from China's part to export. That provided a very welcome supply line to the world, reaching from India and Southeast Asia as far away as Latin America. Overall, it's been a story of very firm prices, constrained supply, a lot of concern when it comes to materials such as sulfur and ammonia coming into phosphates production. We've seen a lot of concern there, whether that is because of European legislation coming into effect later in 2026, or whether raw materials are just used for other things like nickel production, in the case of sulfur. But overall, a very complex landscape, which unfortunately isn't moving fast enough to really facilitate a lot of activity. But nonetheless, interesting enough for us to see what the pieces in the puzzle could shift and how things could get moving in the next quarter.
Yes, thank you. Exactly as you already mentioned, phosphate price during past quarter was, let's say, stable high despite the volatility in other fertilizer segment. And there are always two parts of this equation. We know first one is cost situation and supply-demand balance. So let's start with the cost first. What is your view upon the situation with raw materials cost in Q4, taking into account, as you mentioned, recent outage of modern ammonia unit, which obviously influences the situation in the ammonia market, and continued elevated sulfur price, and also please explain in a bit more details situation in phosphoric acid, where the new contract was just set a couple of days ago. So how all this will influence cost situation for Q4?
Absolutely. So just to preface this by saying, as we mentioned, prices have been so firm, but recently we have been seeing some cautious signs of easing. So we've seen prices in India drop a little bit. We've seen neighboring Pakistan also have lower indicative prices, even though we haven't seen much activity there yet. So we should, and also in Europe as well as Brazil. So all the key markets really are showing signs of easing. that said, we already come from a very, very firm point. So it's not like, things are automatically at the level where it's very conducive to activity all of a sudden. However, it is encouraging to buyers that prices are beginning to drop a little bit. Now, into this preface, we have to follow this up, of course, with the concern for rising sulfur prices, a lot of demand in Southeast Asia, and as you mentioned, of course, the outage for Ma'aden. On the ammonia front, we have a lot of availability concerns, really, and that is really the trend in most of the market. We have a lot of concerns east of Suez because of the ammonia shortage. We have some indications that this could be this outage could cost the market a significant amount. How is this going to affect phosphates production? So far, it needs to be said that at least when it comes to phosphates, we haven't seen a direct impact, or if there is, we just haven't heard of it so far. But in the minds of many, whenever there's ammonia supply constraints, that's a significant concern. Now, when it comes to the uncertainty is, I would say, the worst, the most significant impact with these things because producers, buyers cannot really plan accordingly, and we'll touch into this later when talking about the incoming legislation in the European Union, CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is essentially this same conversation, but on overdrive. It's just really, really significant how it is expected to affect anyone who deals with carbon, really, and how they have to purchase certificates to deal with it. In terms of those supply constraints, of course, they are a concern. So far, though, because prices have just been so firm for such a long time, we haven't seen the market react to those supply concerns just yet. If there will be a reaction to it, we expect there to be a slight delay. But so far, India seems to be managing okay. China, for them to be opening up, they've covered their own domestic needs. Brazil, the season is, for all intents and purposes, over, at least when it comes to phosphates. And we've covered before many times how Brazilian farmers have been quite very adaptable and ingenuously, like just really playing with the market and turning to other products when it comes to phosphates, and adapting to firm prices. So that is the story overall. These supply constraints are significant. We haven't seen a direct impact just yet. Now, when it comes to phosphoric acid that you mentioned, the settlement came in last week. Once again, it was Jordan's JPMC with Coromandel who settled the price. And we've had some estimates that place the cost of production at around in the 720s per ton CFR, per ton, rather, I should say. And import prices are quite a bit higher. Another variable that makes this equation interesting now is the fact that any day now we're expecting the Indian government to step in with government subsidies. As with all these things, it's quite difficult to predict which way it's going to go, and whether the government will take significant action. I think it would be fair to say most sources do not expect there to be a significant impact. We still expect that importers might find it quite challenging to bring DAP into the country. So that wouldn't really change the status quo in the country. Importers still have to take quite a bit of losses to bring DAP into India. And to my eyes, it's probably a bit unlikely that we would see that change overnight, just this week. But nonetheless, India is dealing with the situation just fine in terms of the phosphates front, despite earlier reports of some shortages in parts of India. We've seen India step up and conclude deals with Saudi Arabia for significant amounts. They've concluded deals with Morocco for significant amounts. So they seem to be preparing for Rabi and seem to be on course to deal with the situation just fine. So the phosphoric acid was settled at a bit of an increase. That was a bit of a surprise, putting the cost of production a bit up. But I think considering where prices have been, that's probably something that wasn't totally out of, the realm of possibility. That was just an adjustment to reality. And given, as we mentioned, the firm prices for ammonia and sulfur, it sort of makes sense. It's explicable to me. So given a very long answer, to condense ammonia and sulfur, there's a lot of availability concerns for phosphates. However, we haven't seen the market react just yet. If anything, we've seen prices ease, but that's probably a result of how prices have been, how firm they've been for a very, very long time. And it's a reaction to that sort of correction. And if there is any effect, it's likely to be, seen later in Q4, not just, it hasn't been observed just yet.
I hope that in Q4 we will not see the reaction at this increase in costs. Why? Because the key word that I heard about situation in phosphate segment during the past quarter was affordability issue. Whatever market you discuss, or wherever you come, you hear exactly the same issue. What is your view? How extremely low affordability influenced demand in Q3, and what will be the consequences for Q4 and maybe into Q1 even? How it will evolve for key markets?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, and again, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior in this instance. And, if we are to look at, oh, why hasn't, the market reacted to these very valid concerns on ammonia and sulfur? Why hasn't the needle moved so far? In my mind, it's kind of like asking why hasn't someone who's in the middle of a flood why aren't they buying an umbrella? They're already so immersed in this flood that, to them, any more fluctuation is, sort of not directly a concern immediately. So it could be that, we do see the market move and, the market has really expressed significant concern over the Ma'aden outage. Ma'aden is a significant pillar of the ammonia market. We've seen the ammonia market move for sure. The spot availability is very, very difficult to find. Contract prices moving up, prices are firming. Of course, that could be also the psychological burden of the CBAM approaching and as well. But that would be, of course, whether we see prices rebound a bit again. In my opinion, things have been so firm for so long that I'm just not sure how viable it would be for buyers anyway. And sulfur producers, some sources said, they did see some premiums over firm phosphate prices in the past. So maybe that's a readjustment that maybe they should have been expecting. I'm not sure, but I would not be surprised to see prices firm again. But the long-term trend is just not viable in my humble opinion. And we're already seeing this with prices beginning to ease in many segments of the market for various products.
Yeah, indeed, fully agree with you. And what do you think? How the situation with affordability influenced purchase patterns in terms of portfolio? So we already discussed that there are certain opportunities, to substitute
Yeah.
very highly priced products like DEP with something less fancy, with lower content of nutrients. Both P and nitrogen, of course. So how do you see the situation evolving in Q4 and onwards? Do you still see it in the market? How it will develop? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, really. And I would love to have a more panoramic view of the market to be able to say. So I can say so far what we've seen. We've seen, for example, different places react to diverse products in different ways. So let's say India, we've seen limited adoption of mini DAP and mini urea so far. I don't suspect that is anything to do with the products. I suspect this is mostly to do with how familiar the farmers are with these products and how easy they are to get hold of. Other markets such as Brazil, we've seen the main driver behind change has been firm prices. But that is really led by the farmers themselves. Like it's not someone else directing or encouraging behavioral change. It's mostly them, just adapting to the landscape and trying to find alternative solutions. And so we have seen, of course, absolutely, it's them pivot to different grades of TSP, SSP, is substituting the necessary nitrogen with ammonium nitrate, for example. We've seen them turn to various grades of MPs, depending on the needs of the soil. So there's absolutely been a lot of ingenuity and a lot of adaptability there. We also see the same behavior that you just mentioned in Europe. We're seeing a long-term trend away from DAP and towards more custom-made MPs, which could be argued could be even better for the soil in some instances to give the soil exactly what the nutritional needs are, rather than a one-size-fits-all solution like DAP, which of course, can be costly, may not address specifically what the needs of the soil are, could maybe lead to some waste in some instances. So it's all interesting to see. However, in my opinion, what we see so far is these tend to be more efficient changes, longer lasting, when the farmers have some degree of agency to it rather than someone else, an organization or a government entity, no matter how well-meaning there may be, if the farmer is not included in the decision, they're less likely to adopt that. And that, I think, is probably the best predictor for how widely adopted those products are going to be. There is definitely not a lack of products out there that are, that are vying to be the next DAP or the next MAP. Custom-made MPs, I would say, in my opinion, are probably the best suited, given the customizability. However, the market and the farmer themselves are probably the best predictor for how successful those will be in the long run. That's my take on it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you indeed. And another thing that we also discussed with you one time is the sustainability. Actually, this is this trend which you just mentioned. It's not only because the farmers lack money and finance to buy these expensive fertilizers, but also because there is some more strategic thing behind it. Can you please share your view upon that?
Yeah, of course. And you and I touched briefly on this right before we spoke. We said how important it is. It's something that we genuinely believe in, and it's something that is not just necessarily driven out of, a love for, our environment and our planet. It's genuinely something that I believe it's good economic sense to be aware of, to be really aware of what the new products that are coming up the pipeline could be, what the nutritional, environmental needs could be. We're seeing, for example, significant concern in some parts of the world, such as parts of Ireland. We're seeing some concern over the buildup of green-blue algae, which can be the result of fertilizer use as well. So I think it is good economic and good sense in general as inheritors of this planet to be aware that our behavior can affect our environment. That said, there isn't something on an industrial scale just now that is really ready to take up the mantle to sort of address some of these concerns. It's just about awareness. And the more our audience and we ourselves are aware of alternative solutions, I think the better. At this stage, as we were saying before, there is remarkable research being done in various institutions, whether within companies or within universities, to really find ways to minimize the impact of fertilizer use can be on the planet. Some of it really ingenious, I have to say, really just extremely intelligent and, using our resources to the best possible way. Some are trying to maximize plant uptake, some trying to, reduce runoffs, some just trying to make the plants more efficient, sort of in a genetic sense. But nothing so far that really has been adopted or is ready to be adopted within the next, as for the market players out there to be aware of. However, having said that, I think it's really important to be aware that these studies are being done and that human capital and knowledge and energy is being poured into it because who knows what in a few years what could come up the pipeline. It's not possible to keep track of all the hundreds of studies, but it is possible that in a few years, some products do emerge as a viable alternative, and it's good to be aware of them, if nothing else, just for good market sense and good sustainability and environmental awareness.
Indeed, indeed. Yes, fully agree with you. Let's move to supply situation discussion. So, as you already mentioned, there were several, let's say, important things which happened during Q3 that will definitely influence situation in Q4. First of all, is China, of
Yeah.
course with quite a significant amount of export quotas that were utilized during these two past quarters. However, there is still a discussion, and it is in the air if China gives more export quotas and will extend the exports actually to Q4, which is unusual because their domestic market starts. So, what is your view? What will happen with this? Let's say the most or one of the most important factors of international supply demand balance.
Yeah, goodness, trying to predict what China will do. I mean, that is the difficult thing, really. The lack of, and I would say truly what challenges most of the market is the lack of transparency and communication. And there really, wherever there's lack of communication, there's space for, lots of speculation and people project their own needs and their own takes on it. So we have to start by saying there is no official communication on any of this. There are some good indications from some segments of the market, but nonetheless, we should be taking everything with a pinch of salt. Had you told me, over the summer that, China would reach out to India and they would start exporting directly again, I would have, been very, very surprised. So we should just always be mindful that these sort of policy decisions are subject to change and not very transparent. And, if some internal machination within China changes, we would not know until much later that this policy would be affected. However, given what we know already, it's a very welcome change that China is directly exporting, and that is, what traditionally has been a major supplier for the world is now looking outward once again. And even though it is still a shadow of what it used to be, it was still a very welcome change of pace. And, it was, I believe, a Chinese origin cargo that was sold to India at lower levels during the previous week. So, that goes to show that availability of product does have an impact, and it really can fundamentally change our perception and the psychology of what the market could bring. And that itself can lead to more changes. So, the psychological impact of it has been significant, not least the material impact, of course. But when it comes to seeing new export quotas, that's a whole different conversation. I haven't, it's something we've heard a lot, and many people are expecting it. However, until we have something more concrete, I'm sort of just a little bit hesitant to say it's going to happen for sure. And it's already at levels that are, I believe the number was 500,000 DAP and 100,000 MAP and some other custom-made solutions. So absolutely not negligible, but this product would go to various destinations, so it would not directly solve anyone's problems overnight. It would create an opportunity, but it's likely to fundamentally change the landscape. It would just be something that helps a trend rather than, like a magic card.
Yes, there is no magic wand, let's say indeed, but
Indeed.
a Chinese product was already an important participant in the tenders, in the recent tenders for
Yeah.
Bangladesh and for Ethiopia, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so what is the situation with the tenders now? Because they stalled a bit. So what do you hear? What do you think will happen? Because that's would be also the factor for the Q4, right?
Yeah, for sure. We should just say for our listeners, we're recording this beginning of October, and by the time this gets out, things may have changed. But from where we stand now, the most recent Ethiopian DAP tender has been scrapped, and no one is entirely sure why. We do know that they had asked for revised offers, that was significantly lower than the offers they had originally received. And so, even though you're right to point out that China was a major supplier for those tenders, and perhaps that quantity, the revised export quotas, would be sort of funneled into those countries. Because we should say, at the very least, in the case of Bangladesh, because of the country's credit problems in recent years, any product sold to them is at a premium due to the credit risks posed by the country. So it can be quite a lucrative, business to enter into. However, Bangladesh tender also stalled. We've seen a stay order imposed by the High Court. There must have been some foul play. Details are difficult to come by, and I don't want to add to speculation. But it could be that we see activity pick up again, hopefully this week or the next, as some of these issues are being ironed out and some cargoes are allowed to come in. But nonetheless, we should still expect Ethiopia and Bangladesh to be a significant destination to mop up a lot of product that would otherwise go to other destinations. Ethiopia, particularly, have been quite surprised by the amount that they've absorbed, really, particularly Chinese product. And I suspect it's because, again, prices are a little bit of a premium there. But it is a little bit uncertain what they will do now, if they will still issue a new tender, if they are still covered, if they covered for the product they needed. But I would expect that the Chinese are at standby to ready to submit offers and to be ready to supply the country. So absolutely, market players should be aware that both Bangladesh and Ethiopia, more story to come. We're not quite done there yet. And that poses an interesting challenge for buyers in India, Pakistan, America, as far as America. Absolutely.
Yes, right. And coming back to supply, I also wanted to check your opinion regarding supply from Morocco, the largest global supplier. Do you see still that their, let's say, strategy moving from DEP to TSP and SSP is, let's say, growing and developing, and how it will influence the Q4 in the market?
Yeah, that is definitely a long-term strategy that they have. And I think this comes up against a little bit of an obstacle when we mentioned before about farmer familiarity with different products. And there has been some concerns on TSP, on how well it can be combined with other products and how well it can be stored. But overall, I haven't seen anything that fundamentally shifts the landscape in TSP's direction, to be honest. I think there will always be. I see it more as a very gradual shift away from DAP that can be accelerated by economic factors. But when it comes to Indian farmers specifically, I see demand for DAP just still very robust. And I see farmers more likely to pivot to products such as custom-made MPs, and supplement that with some grades of SSP than anything specifically TSP. And that is a very important strategy that OCP has picked. It really it's a very interesting choice. But I have, like, specifically when it comes to India, I haven't seen anything. I see other markets could be more easily adaptable. Brazil, we've seen a lot of interest in TSP, of course. Argentina, but less so with the traditional big markets. That could be a bit of a long play, long game. But as a strategy for Q4, does that have any material impact on the situation? Probably not in the way that we would expect. Nothing that would move the needle so much, I would say. It's more something that buyers should be aware.
Okay, I see. Apart from the cost situation and supply-demand balance that we already discussed, there is other important, very, very important factor influencing situation in the market, and it is institutional factor, which we again discussed from many angles previously. Like, for example, when US started this tariff story rollout early in the year. And now we are approaching a very, very hot period for European market because as of January 1, CBAM will be rolled out completely, and it will, of course, change the whole setup in Europe. So, how do you think what will be the effect from this rollout? Because I hear myself a lot of confusion from all the markets, all the buyers, and buyers, traders as well. So, what is your view? How it will change the situation and what the market has to be prepared for, let's say?
I really like that you started this question by referencing the tariff regime because there's a very interesting analogy with the CBAM conversation. And I would argue the CBAM rollout has been, in my opinion, more thought out. And there's been more implementation and more thinking. That is not to say that it cannot be very disruptive for some people, and I absolutely respect that. But what's been interesting to see, it's been a case study in the tariff implementation. We have seen supply chains upended and really people very uncertain. And we really cannot underestimate the uncertainty. I think in this instance, it can be such a big challenge for industries to overcome. And people can be split. I've noticed people can be split in two camps. One camp can be how can I protect my bottom line? How can I prepare for this? And the other one is, well, I need to gather more data and I need to see how this will affect me. And so I will just wait for the market to tell me and I'll do nothing. And in many instances, I've seen, companies literally do nothing and wait to see what the impact will be before they can then pivot strategically and make the informed decisions they need to do. Now, in the instance of CBAM, it's not as something as impulsive and sort of quick. It's something that the European Union has advised on multiple levels on a variety. It's done consultations. It's I would argue a well thought through piece of legislation that has an important function. But nonetheless, we should really not underestimate how really challenging has been for parts of the industry, particularly for ammonia, where we come back to the uncertainty. People are just not sure how to prepare for this. And again, like with tariffs, I think a lot of people pivot back to the position of safety of I'll see what the market tells me. I'll just see what the challenges are so that I can then prepare. So we haven't seen any beyond a general sense of an ominous feeling of what's coming and being prepared to add more costs. We haven't seen any significant change in the phosphates world for the upcoming CBAM. But we do get queries a lot. Should we have should we be thinking about pricing in a different way? Should we be weighing carbon costs? Should we have different price ranges for different origins and things like that? So people are trying to predict, but in essence, what I think people are coming to think is, I'll let the market tell me how I need to adjust, and then I will make the necessary adjustments, my supply lines and in my, do I revert to some long-term contracts to secure product? Do I just change the way I procure volume proactively? And that could be a way forward for some, just trying to mitigate the uncertainty. But there has not been, as far as I can tell, one size fits all approach that just magically solves CBAM for added costs. The hard truth will probably be that for a lot of people, this will mean a bit of a transition with added costs. And I mean, in this current climate, I can absolutely understand this is a difficult proposition to begin with. But as far as I can tell, it's moving ahead. 1st of January, it's coming. And that will probably mean, a lot of, added costs to buy CBAM certificates for importers of the big fertilizers, DAP, MAP, SSP. And that will inevitably, trickle down to farmers. And farmers already are feeling the squeeze in many ways. shifting geopolitics, tariffs. Those are very important challenges. And to add that extra challenge on top of it, I can absolutely understand why some people are quite concerned about this. So it's a difficult proposition, and the industry will have to pivot, and it's a long-term adjustment. This isn't, a US administration that may or may not be here. This is a long-term shift in strategic thinking and trying to sort of disentangle from carbon is a tricky proposition in the best climate, let alone in today's challenging climate.
I fully agree with you that part of the problem with CBAM is actually related not to CBAM itself, but perhaps to the point in time when CBAM comes into force, because something that happened as of July 1st in Europe was not planned as much in advance, of course, but it actually started before CBAM, and now CBAM kicks in on top of that, which is additional duties for Russian origin products. How do you
Indeed.
see, how did it, what was the reaction in the market, how the market changed because of these duties, and what do you think will be the next steps, let's say, for the market? Will the market try to import more or less, or it's already happened?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think it can be a good indication to think about the tariffs imposed on the Russian product and how those could preempt CBAM. In some ways, this could work. In some others, I think maybe it might not be the best indication. For example, we've seen, parts of Europe like Italy. We've seen Russian product just not. We've had sources say, Russian product has just stopped arriving in our place. We're just naturally the market pivoted away from it and into other origins. But CBAM is so much more all-encompassing. It's just so much wider in its net that I think it's going to require fundamental rethinking of supply chains, really, and how we, think about carbon. And I fully agree with your sentiment. It's the timing of it is probably the worst thing about it, to be honest, of this current climate. In terms of Russian product, we've seen Russians be very strategic about this, and they've been very good at redirecting product to other destinations. However, and the natural preference for it in Europe has dropped. That is not to say it's disappeared, but when there's that added premium, you could argue, CBAM has been on the pipeline for some time. It's been sort of thought through on a deep level. But the Russian tariffs have been, of course, as well, but they're also on a shorter timeline. So the market was less ready, I would argue, for them. So beyond that natural realignment to supplement it with product from other origins, I think the analogy with CBAM can be quite tricky at times because just CBAM is just so all-encompassing, and we're seeing the concern in multiple segments of the market. This goes without saying, but it's not just phosphates. There's many people who are concerned about this.
Sure. I want to thank you very much, Chris, for this super insightful, as usually, discussion that will be extremely helpful to everyone who is doing business in phosphates and who will be doing business in Q4. So thank you again. And
Thank you, Maria.
I will be glad to meet here again in a quarter from now and to see what will be the trends at that time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and the conversation. As always, it's always interesting and insightful, and your takes as well are just so fascinating to get. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really look forward to next time as well.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. As usually, I will leave all credentials of Chris and ICIS in the comments. Please let me know in the comments which other questions related to phosphate segment of fertilizers market you would like me to uncover, and I will be glad to do so with Chris next time. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and see you soon.